One piece of smart technology could help solve a murder mystery in Arkansas.
Two Pine Bluff teens are in jail tonight facing murder charges. Police say they are in custody in connection to the shooting death of two 17-year-olds.
There's a bizarre story in Russellville, Arkansas today. A man who reportedly quit his job over low pay went on a shooting spree with two handguns.
Tributes are pouring in for Ann Presley. The Little Rock TV anchorwoman died over the weekend.
A suspect in the deadly Fayetteville shooting on New Year's Day in court this morning.
A Little Rock mother is pleading for help tonight. She is asking anyone.
Thanks for listening to Strictly Homicide, an Arkansas true crime podcast covering lesser-known cases out of the natural state. I'd like to start off by thanking my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to help support us, you can find us on Patreon and help with as little as $1 a month. There's also a donate button for a one-time donation on strictlyhomicide.com. Please stay tuned until the end of the show to hear a few promos from some of my favorite shows. Warning: Strictly Homicide covers cases that include sexual assault, violence, and homicide. Episodes may contain explicit language and are not suitable for young ears. Listener discretion is advised. Hey y'all, thanks for downloading episode 24 and part 5 of the Rushed Execution series. This is part 2 of Jack Jones Jr.'s episode, so if you haven't listened to episode 23, make sure you go and do that now. In fact, I would suggest listening to parts 1 through 5 of this series before starting this episode. From here out, I'll be reviewing the outcome of those cases that I've already covered.
Arkansas is going to kill 8 men in 10 days because their drugs was going to run out.
In episode 18, I covered inmate number 1 of the Arkansas 8, Bruce Ward, scheduled to be executed on April 17th in 2017. Ward was granted a stay of execution and avoided death on April 17th. In episode 19, I covered inmate number 2 of the Arkansas 8, Don Davis. He was scheduled to be executed on April 17th as well. Davis was also granted a stay of execution, avoiding death on this day, making April 17th a day with no executions. In episode 20, I covered inmate number 3 of the Arkansas 8, Liddell Lee, scheduled to be executed on April 20th, 2017. Lee was not granted a stay of execution and was executed on his scheduled date of April 20th.
After 21 years on death row, Liddell Lee maintains his innocence. Prosecutors say Lee committed violent crimes against 5 women, all in Jacksonville.
In episode 22, I covered inmate number 4 of the Arkansas 8, Stacy Johnson, scheduled to be executed on April 20th, the same day as Liddell Lee, but he was granted a stay of execution and did not die that day. Leaving us to this case, Jack Henry Jones Jr. We are continuing to discuss his case in episode 24, the second half of part 5 in the Rushed Execution series. Episode 23 ended right after Jack Henry Jones was convicted and sentenced to the death penalty. This episode will not include any information on the town the murder occurred in, Bald Knob, Arkansas, but you can hear about it and the year of this crime in episode 23. Before we get started, let's hear a word from our sponsors. Are you a fan of Strictly Homicide Podcast? Well, of course you are. What would you say if I told you that you can earn points that allow you to purchase gift cards just for listening to Strictly Homicide and any other podcast you listen to? I want to tell you about an app that I love. I noticed a new app pop up on my suggestions for something called PodCoin. The description was that you can earn points that convert to gift cards for listening to podcasts through the app. I thought it sounded awesome, but was skeptical. Like way too good to be true. A week later, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, All Crime No Cattle with Shay and Aaron. When I heard Shay mention the app, I thought, hey, if Shay and Aaron approve, so will I. I downloaded the app and tested it for 2 weeks, and I love it. I listen to shows all day in the background while I'm at work, so it was easy to start racking up points. The points you earn for listening can be used to purchase things like gift cards, including gift cards to Starbucks. And if y'all know me at all, you know how much I love Starbucks and how much I need it to live. I use PodCoin to listen to all my shows. There hasn't been a show I couldn't find. And the app is also super easy to use. It's free to download, and you automatically earn 300 points if you use the invite code Homicide. Jack Jones Jr. grew up in Toledo, Ohio with his sister Lynn. During an interview, she said she recalls her brother being a loving and caring child who liked to draw and tell stories, but she also remembers a whole other side to him. She says that as a child, Jack suffered mental and physical abuse by his father and was sexually abused by 3 strangers who abducted and raped him. She said that Jack has always suffered from mental illness and battled with alcohol and drug addiction, which changed the loving boy into an angry monster. Jack's mother had a serious gambling addiction, which caused major problems, and his dad was a severe alcoholic, mentally and physically abusive. On Jack's first birthday, he had a very high fever, which caused convulsions. And at age 5, he was taken to the doctor where he was diagnosed with ADHD and prescribed Ritalin. His family described how he would sometimes rock back and forth and bang his head up against a cupboard. They also said that he would see hallucinations and thought that bugs, ants, and spiders were trying to get him. He thought in order to keep the bugs from getting him that he had to hold very still. It's very possible that this was due to the Ritalin he was prescribed at such a young age. When Jack was 16, his doctors recommended that his family see a psychotherapist and family therapist, which was ignored. Jack suffered from bipolar, antisocial personality, and depression his whole life, which was left untreated. He began using illegal drugs at a very young age, and in 1989, Jack attempted his first record-failed suicide. In 1991, he attempted to kill himself again by jumping off a bridge and was involuntarily admitted into a psychiatric facility. In 1995, not even 6 months prior to the murder in Bald Knob, he voluntarily committed himself to Pinnacle Point Hospital in Little Rock for severe depression and repeated suicidal thoughts. He spent 6 days there and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and prescribed lithium. In 2005, Jones filed an application for executive clemency, claiming significant circumstances concerning his mental health and background and how they were never brought up during trial. They used an expert who had surrendered his medical license in 1993 to enter substance abuse treatment. He got his license reinstated in 1994, only under supervision from the medical board. This expert said he left Jones' file in the car the morning that he testified, and that Jack couldn't be bipolar because he was bipolar himself. In 1991, while Jack was living in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a tourist was found raped and murdered in her hotel room. 32-year-old Lorraine Barrett's mother was against her plans to vacation in Fort Lauderdale for 5 days alone, but Lorraine insisted. She was a customer service representative for a telephone company in a small town in Pennsylvania. She was loved by so many people who have nothing but amazing things to say about her. Lorraine was planning to visit her best friend Laura. They were very close, always together until Laura had to move to her parents' home in Fort Lauderdale due to medical problems. Lorraine would often help her with day-to-day activities, like cooking and errands, but she eventually got worse and had to go stay with her parents. Friday evening, Lorraine arrived in Fort Lauderdale and phoned her best friend to let her know. She told Laura that she would be meeting a friend later that night in an establishment named Coconuts. When the friend did not arrive, she went to the elbow room where she met a man. The man claimed to be a world traveler. He was showing off his tattoos at the bar, claiming to have got them done all over the U.S. Lorraine and the man left the bar for a while and returned that night for another drink. After that, they left to walk to another bar at the Days Inn. This was the last time Lorraine was seen alive, with this man in an elevator around 2 a.m. Although many witnesses saw them together and even spoke to the man, no one knew his name or where he was from. Saturday, June 1st, 1991, around noon, a maid was doing her rounds at the Days Inn where she entered Lorraine's room on the 8th floor. She found Lorraine's lifeless body. During the investigation of her murder, witnesses described the man Lorraine was spotted with as 5'8" and 150 pounds, around 30 years old, wearing blue jeans and a sleeveless t-shirt that showed off his tattoos. The tattoos were very distinctive, and the ones on his wrists looked like barbed wire. Police did release a sketch of the man that was seen with Lorraine, but the case went cold and stayed cold until 2002. The case was taken over by a new detective in 2002. He submitted DNA samples found at the crime scene to the National DNA Indexing System, which did not exist in 1991. He requested that it be ran against other states and not just Florida. A year later, in March 2003, the detective learned that a match came back for the DNA. A convicted murderer in Arkansas named Jack Henry Jones Jr. The description of the killer, his tattoos, and facial features all matched Jones, who they found lived in the area on June 1st in 1991. Just 4 years and 5 days before Jones walked into the accounting office in Bald Knob. They served a fugitive warrant on Jones at the prison in Arkansas and started the process to bring him back to face the charges. By this time, Jones had already filed and lost 2 appeals for his conviction in Arkansas and was in the process of a 3rd appeal when the fugitive warrant was issued. Jones's attorney wouldn't allow the police to question Jones until the legal process in the 3rd appeal was completed. Once Jones was flown to Florida, the prosecuting attorney offered to waive the death penalty if he pled guilty, and he accepted. Jack had an execution date of October 16, 2007. During his 2007 hearing on his application for executive clemency, he pled for forgiveness and told the parole board that he owned responsibility for the murders and acknowledges that his apologies mean nothing and cannot replace the person. The state parole board voted to recommend no clemency be given to him. Jones argued that his scheduled date of October 16, 2007 should be delayed as the Supreme Court hears 2 Kentucky inmate cases over the lethal injection method. A week before his execution date on October 16th, he was granted a stay by the federal judges. The federal appeals court in Little Rock lifted the stay blocking Jones' execution a little under a year later in September 2008, but no execution date was set. A challenge was filed by an attorney for an inmate named Frank Williams Jr., saying that they needed to review the new lethal injection method. This caused a delay in Jones' execution. A delay that would last until 2010, when Governor Beebe scheduled March 16, 2010, as Jack Jones Jr.'s execution date. third execution date. In the fall of 2009, the Supreme Court upheld the lethal injection procedures. In February 2010, Jones' clemency hearing was held, followed by the victim's hearing. It was almost 15 years after Mary's death and the worst night of Lacey's life. She was 25 now and told the Arkansas Board of Parole that Jack Jones Jr. deserves no second chances. He pled for forgiveness again and said he was under the influence of drugs that day. On March 8, 2010, 8 days before his execution date, Jones filed a complaint in federal district court, requesting a stay of execution or a preliminary injunction. The judge felt that Jones met the standards and granted him a stay of execution. On March 12, 2010, 4 days before the scheduled execution date, the state moved to vacate the stay. The panel assigned to the case declined to rule on the stay prior to his execution date of March 16. At the end of March, the Attorney General petitioned Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito to lift the stay, which was eventually lifted in April, and his execution date was set for May 24, 2010, after numerous complaints, lawsuits, and stays. In Toledo, Ohio, a young lady named Gina had petitioned the probate court to have her birth certificate released. Gina was born in 1985 and was placed for adoption. She received her birth certificate and contact information for her biological mother. Gina phoned her biological mother, and during their conversation, one of the many questions Gina had asked was who her biological father is. Gina's biological mother told her that her biological father's name is Jack Jones Jr., and he was currently on Arkansas death row. Gina was so upset, she felt dizzy and didn't know how to process the news. And she thought, the man who gave me my life took the life of others? Gina grew up in a sheltered life, so she immediately felt grateful for her adoptive parents. This didn't stop Gina from wanting to correspond with her biological father and let him know that she was okay and turned out great. Gina sent Jack a letter and he responded immediately. Gina said of the relationship, "We just built a very intense bond." She strongly felt that her father was not the same man that he was when he committed the crimes. She agreed that he needed to be in prison, but did not agree that he needed to be executed. She believed that he changed. In September 2015, nearly a decade after Arkansas's last execution, the Attorney General asked the governor to set an execution date for the 8 inmates, and Jones was scheduled December 14, 2015, which was then blocked when an Arkansas judge issued an order that temporarily blocked the upcoming executions, Jones being one of them. The ongoing arguments between inmates and the courts were exhausting. The families were sick of going through this pain over and over again. The family members believed that once he is put to death, closure will be brought to them. And in February 2017, when the governor announced the new execution date, April 24, 2017, Gina headed to Arkansas to be at the Cummins unit on April 24, 2017. Gina was able to make the trip to Arkansas because of an anti-death penalty activist and the founder of Death Penalty Action. She made it to Little Rock just in time to visit with her father the day before his execution. It was the first and the last time that she saw him face to face. Before they parted, Jack took off his wedding ring and gave it to Gina, who now wears it on a chain around her neck. Gina, along with many others, had so many questions that would most likely never be answered. Like, who was the supplier of the drugs being used in the execution? This was part of the whole legal battle involving restraining orders, lawsuits, and stays with the 8 inmates and their lawyers. In the end of that fiasco, it was determined that the supplier's identity did not need to be disclosed. Who were the executioners? Would they be using the same ones for both executions? The public information officer declined to answer the question, citing that Arkansas law protects the identities of the executioners. April 24th, 2017, Jack Jones is scheduled to be executed at 7 p.m. Outside protesters had their own designated area that was taped off with caution tape in a field near the Cummins unit. Across the field, there was a separate area designated for supporters of the execution. Inside the designated area for supporters of the execution were members of the Phillips family, gathered to support the execution of Jack Jones Jr. Gina wanted to witness the execution, like Lynn Scott, Jack's sister and Gina's aunt. But Arkansas does not allow relatives to witness executions. During the interview, she said,
I think of it this way. I think of it as if any loved one of mine, was in their final days, whether they were on a hospital bed in hospice or wherever, you would want to be with your loved one to the end. No matter how it's going to happen, it doesn't take away from the fact that I want to be there with Jack to the end. As gruesome as it may sound to someone, he's my brother and I can't walk away from him. And knowing that the witnesses that will be peering through the glass at him have a different mindset than I would. It hurts to know that there's nobody there at that time that truly cares about Jack. And I would want him to know that there's someone right there that truly loves him.
I don't like to insert my personal beliefs or opinions on cases often, but I can't help it here. Did she not stop and think about how the victims died? How no one was there with them? I may not think that the way these executions occurred was humane, but I do feel strongly that Jack Jones was a horrible person and needed to receive his punishment for his crimes sooner than the 22 years after the crime occurred. The governor and attorney general said that the reason that they chose Bruce Ward, Don Davis, Liddell Lee, Stacy Johnson, Jack Jones, Marcel Williams, Kenneth Williams, and Jason McGee for the rushed executions in April 2017 is because of the brutal nature of their crime. Chris Raff, Junior Howard, and Bill Lindsay, the law enforcement officers that were first at the crime scene in Bald Knob, said that they will never be able to forget this crime. Lindsay said, most of the people that we run across, they've got either a drug problem or there's some other reason why they've done something like this. But Jones, he was just cold-blooded. That's what I got from him. He was a cold-blooded person. April 24th, 2017, Jack Jones is scheduled to be executed at 7 p.m., followed by Marcel Williams at 8:15 p.m., an hour and 15 minutes after the first execution. Lacey, who was 32 at the time, said she planned to be at the execution, but in a waiting room. She did not want to watch. Her father, James, said he was going to be there and planned to witness the execution. Lacey's older sister, Darla, said that they all hoped that their mother's murderer would be dead by now. Darla said, "This has dragged on so long, it's affecting another generation. We don't want our babies to hear any of this. We couldn't move on and have that closure because they wouldn't let us. Our worlds have healed. They're making a circus out of it." Before his execution, Jack issues a written statement that says, "I want people to know that when I came to prison, I made up my mind that I would be a better person than when I came in. I had no doubt in my mind that I would make every effort to do this. I'd like to think that I have accomplished this. I made every effort to be a good person. I practiced Buddhism and studied physics. I met the right people and did the right things. There are no words that would fully express my remorse for the pain that I caused." Jack's daughter Gina expressed her interest to witness the execution, reasoning that the people who are going to kill her dad are going to have a hateful eye on him. For weeks, attorneys and advocates warned about the dangers that could happen doing a double execution and the issues that have occurred in the past with the drug midazolam. Both of the men scheduled to be executed on April 24, 2017, had major health problems. This made their risk for problems higher. Outside of the Cummings unit, the protesters huddled together as the execution hour approached, ringing loud morning bells. Internal Affairs arrived and started the execution log at 2:16 p.m. At 4:45 p.m., Jones begins his last meal consisting of fried chicken breasts, beef jerky bites, potato logs with tartar sauce, sliced cheese, 3 Butterfingers, 1 chocolate Butterfinger milkshake, and 2 cups of fruit punch. Jones was finished with his last meal by 5:59 p.m. Around 6:16 p.m., Jones then showers and dresses in clean whites before the escort team arrives at 6:39 p.m. Jones enters the chambers at 6:44 p.m. and is restrained and the catheters are inserted. The escort team exits the chambers and the witnesses enter the viewing room at 6:50 p.m. The witnesses consisted of 3 media witnesses who were allowed only a notepad and pen provided by the Arkansas Department of Corrections, 11 citizen witnesses, which included Chris Raff, 4 victim witnesses, which included Mary's son Jesse, Mary's husband James, 1 spiritual advisor, and 2 attorneys. Jones' sister, Lynn, outside sobbing in a parked car. She was being interviewed by David Kuhn, who was then asked to move to the media area a quarter of a mile away. Inside the Cummings unit, the execution chamber and the viewing room doors are locked at 7:03 p.m., and the curtains to the viewing room are opened. The director then asks Jones for his last words, and Jones responds, "Well, I just want to let the James family and Lacey know how sorry I am. I can't believe I did something to her. I tried to be respectful from the time I took and become a better person. I hope I did better. I hope over time you could learn who I really am from my family and friends. I am not a monster. There was a reason why those things happened that day. I'm so sorry, Lacey. Try to understand. I love you like my child." At 7:06 p.m., the warden says the officials are ready to proceed with the execution and the chemicals are administered. Jones is checked at 7:18 p.m., and the warden summoned the coroner, who entered the chambers and pronounced him dead at 7:20 p.m.
On Monday night, Arkansas executed inmate Jack Jones. The state prepared for another lethal injection for later in the evening in what would be the nation's first double execution since 2000. Jones was pronounced dead at 7:20 Monday night at the state's Cummings unit. Jones's chest stopped moving 2 minutes after officials checked for consciousness, and there were no apparent complications. Jones gave a lengthy last statement with the final words, "I'm sorry."
Shortly after 7:20 p.m., a TV reporter got a phone call and announced to the protesters and supporters, "It's done." Gina cried for her dad, but she also felt relief. She hugged her fellow activists and prayed with a church group. After the execution, Mary's husband said, "It don't matter if they suffered a little bit. as far as I'm concerned, because my wife suffered big time. I know a lot of people forgiven him and all that kind of stuff. They can protest all they want. It doesn't matter. Lacey described the wait for Jones' sentence to be carried out as mentally exhausted, especially the last month. The Phillips have to relive that horrible night for 22 years, while a man who admitted to the crimes fought for his punishment. Lacey said, "What they've done is help serve justice. They took care of what was ruled in 1996, and they gave our family some justice. So thank you, and I appreciate everything. I'm glad it's done. I'm glad that part of my life, that chapter, can be closed." That chapter can be closed for the Phillips and the Barrett family. But not long after his execution, when he was already dead, a new chapter reopened for the family of murder victim Regina Harrison. "20-year-old Regina Harrison is described as a deeply religious, sweet young lady who is attending Palm Beach Atlantic College, which is a Christian school in West Palm Beach. She had just returned home for summer vacation, and on May 2nd, 1983, she went out for an after-dinner bike ride. Witnesses said that they saw her along a popular bike path with a skinny, long-haired man on a black bike. That would be the last time anyone would see Regina. The next day, her body was found nude in a park. She had been raped and strangled. For 5 months, this case went unsolved, until a Fort Lauderdale detective saw the case on TV and felt the description fit a serial rapist that was serving time for rape in Mississippi. His name was Ronald Stewart. A witness picked Stewart out of a photo lineup, and an acquaintance of his said that he confessed to him that he raped and murdered a girl and left her in a park. In January 1985, Florida offered Stewart a deal that if he pled guilty to second-degree murder, they would drop some of the other charges he was facing for sexual assault. Stewart accepted because he felt like he didn't have a defense. Stewart accepted the plea because he felt like he didn't have a defense and was sentenced to 50 years, which he would serve concurrent with time sentenced from other crimes. Stewart was serving time for multiple rapes that occurred in Florida and Mississippi in the early 1980s. He died in 2008 while serving his sentence. Because of Ronald's history, no one ever doubted that he was not the killer, and he never disputed killing her. In 1983, DNA testing wasn't available. If it was, Ronald would have never been convicted for Regina Harris's rape and murder. While Jack Jones was on death row in Arkansas, he wrote a letter to his sister, Lynn Scott. Jones gave his sister this letter in 2007 and asked that she not open it until a year after his execution. In November of 2018, over a year after Jones' death and 11 years after she was given the letter, she opened it. The penmanship in the letter is hard to read, but a messy translation was found, and I will do my best. Angela and I married November of 82, and you all left for Florida early 83. We stayed with Rick and Missy till you settled in, and we then followed you down to Hollywood. It's been 23 years, so I don't recall the month, but it happened a few weeks before Angela and I left to return to Ohio. She haunted the little apartment we had there at the end of the block, the motel converted to apartment. That's the time frame, maybe early summer of 83, late spring, early summer. There's Hollywood, Florida, and just beside us is Dania, right? I might have pronounced that wrong, sorry if I did. Back to the letter. Okay. You go to the end of the street we lived on, the Italian restaurant there, U.S. Highway 1 that goes north and south. Hang a left and head north a few blocks to the next main road, heading east and west. East to the beach, Sheridan, I believe. Turn right and head towards the beach, east. There is a park on the right, I believe called Sheridan Park. Little wooden place, bike paths, a small pond. I met her riding bikes. We went to the beach, rode around down there, and came back up to Sheridan and into the park. That's where it happened. White girl, red hair, maybe 110 pounds. 5'5". I think her name might have been Catherine. It's been so long. She haunted me for 3 years, and we made peace. She moved on. She was really mad at first, missed her parents, but she learned things over there that helped her, and she got to understand who I was and why I'd done such a thing. She forgave me. I never forgave myself. I believe she was found the next day, the following evening. There was a story in the newspaper. A composite picture drawn of me. Someone remembered us riding around by the beach. Didn't look much like me. I think there's a reward. There was, I believe it was, and it says ineligible, 10,000 or perhaps even 100,000. John Mongo Curcio, 954, old number, cell 954, old number. I think they took it out. I'm trusting that you'll deal with this tactfully. With the respect it deserves, no circus here. You check the newspaper archives. You'll find the story, the name of the family. If you can track them down on your own, great. If you cannot, then John can, for sure. I trust Mongo. He'll handle it well enough. He already knows that I have someone, in quotes, who's gonna handle this whole thing once I'm gone, but doesn't know who. I've never given him a reason to believe I wouldn't take care of it, so he trusts me that far. Always been straight with him, which is why he respects me and we're friends, end quotes. But Mongo's a cop. Now I believe that if you went to him, he'd handle this with you very quietly, non-publicly. However, ethically, I'm pretty sure he'll have to tell his superiors. And at that point, I lose faith. Anything could happen from there. I'm sure he'd do his best to keep it as secret and quiet as possible on his end, but he's no control over the others. There are leaks in the system, and the media could get with and run a story in the paper of a 23-year-old cold case being solved. I don't know. I certainly prefer that it be done discreetly, that it doesn't come back to freak out mom and dad, anyone else. Dad knows. Or at least he knows that I'm going to give this to you to handle for me. Doesn't know any details. Again, if you can find the case on your own, reach the family. That's my preference. I'm trusting you, and you do the right thing. You have everything here to complete the mission, okay? However, you got to get it done. If and when, I want you to let these people know I had you do this. That I wanted them to know. It's one thing to learn that their daughter's killer has finally been brought to justice, end quote, one way or another. But it's more so of a closure instance when the information came about peacefully, without resistance. So that piece is added to peace, rather than adding a measure/element of negativity. I'd considered writing something to give them, but I believe that after all these years, their closure process doesn't need to be overly complicated. So you just let them know that I'm deeply sorry, that I couldn't rest easy until they knew the truth. Let them know that in the end I became a better person, and I did the best I could do to be as much as I could for others, out of respect for the ones I've harmed. I know it's a hell of a thing to have to do, so I thank you. It's the right thing. I'll be watching and do what I can to help from over there. His sister did as he asked, and they ran DNA tests, which confirmed in February 2019 that Jack Jones Jr. raped and murdered Regina Harrison. Since Jones had killed 3 individuals, all in different locations and different times, he's now considered a serial killer. So for 22 years, this monster put his victims and victims' family through hell, fighting his sentence, knowing he raped and murdered 3 different women that he's confessed to. A monster like this never needs to be released back into society. His sentence was well deserved. The DNA results also proved that Ronald Stewart was innocent, and the Broward County State Attorney's Office asked a judge to throw out his murder conviction. Since Jones was already executed, they did not officially charge him with the murder of Regina. Thank you so much for downloading this episode. On episode 25, we'll cover the case of Marcel Williams. Don't forget to keep listening for some great podcast promos. Strictly Homicide is written, hosted, and produced by me, Nicki T. The original music is done by Mr. T. No, not that one. My Mr. T.
If you are a fan of the show, please make sure you are subscribed on iTunes and please rate and review the show. You can also find us on Patreon where you can support the show for as little as $1 a month.
If there is a case that you would like to discuss, or if you have any comments, corrections, or suggestions, send us an email at strictlyhomicide@yahoo.com or on social media. You can find us on most social media sites by searching Strictly Homicide Podcast and on Twitter as @StrictlyHMICIDE. That's Strictly Homicide with no O. You can also visit our website, strictlyhomicide.com. Stick around to hear a few promos from some of the best podcasts around, and until next time, y'all stay safe, especially you, Arkansas.
Do you love true crime, history, and mysterious happenings? Every week on The Cult of Domesticity, a guest and I discuss a different historical happening, a true crime story, or whatever strikes our fancy. Join me, Courtney, every Thursday to hear some fascinating tales from some fascinating people, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Do you get mad when listening to true crime? Well, so do I. If you want a weekly true crime podcast that says what you're thinking, then grab a beer and pull up a deck chair. This is Cambo from True Crime Island, another true crime podcast, and maintain the rage with me. Visit truecrimeisland.com where you can download or stream each episode. Plus there's links to iTunes and social media. And as I always say, don't forget to delete your browser history. This is True Crime Island.
I'm Rosie.
And I'm Ryan.
And we make the Voice of the Victim podcast.
We share stories about horrible things that happen to real people, and we try our best to tell it from the perspective of the victims and the survivors.
We also try to spread awareness of abuse that could be taking place around any of us, and talk about ways we can stay alert to help prevent it.
We want to be encouraging to survivors and help other empathetic people to appreciate the value of awareness.
Find Voice of the Victim podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts.
And remember, if you see something, say something.